So for those of you that don't know me, my name is Nick Pontefract. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Sport England. We haven't had a Chief Strategy Officer before. It basically means that not only do I get to do the fun stuff like writing the strategy, and I have to implement it as well, which is like the really difficult bit. Our board said when we finished the strategy, which lots of you were involved in writing, right, you've done the easy bit, now you've got to get on and do the hard bit, which is not what you want to hear at the end of 18 months of consultation. The last time I was at one of these Y Sport conferences was up in Manchester in 2016. I was reflecting this morning on just how much has changed since then. It's quite funny that Liz talks about the sort of short-term nature of sport strategies. I think we just launched the last sport strategy. I know because I wrote it. It wasn't quite that short-termist, but there was quite a lot that was, and it's a good thing to level at government strategies as a whole. And we've been through lots since then, not least the kind of biggest disruption to all of our own lives, to our sector, to people who are active and people's active lives, thanks to COVID. But as Liz referenced, we've also bounced back. Like, the sector has done an extraordinary job of responding to the biggest challenge it has ever faced through COVID, and in the space of 3 years, rebuilding people's active lives to the point where now people are as active as they were before. Like, we've missed out on lots of opportunities for growth, but that's not nothing getting people back to where they were before. But I think, as you've heard from Liz, and you will all know, the ambition from this sector is absolutely through the roof. I don't know another sector that is quite so ambitious for change as the sport and physical activity sector, which is a great thing, but sometimes needs some guide rails and some boundaries around it to make it deliverable. But that's what we've tried to respond to in writing Uniting the Movement a little while ago now. For those of you that don't know it, that haven't read it, it's our 10-year vision for our mission and a sector's mission to transform people's lives through sport and physical activity. And next January, it will be 3 years old. Entirely sure where the time's a bit like my daughter, like she's just turned 4. I don't know where that went and how that happened. Same with our strategy. There's loads of stuff that's in there that we can celebrate individually, together. We've done loads. We've invested £500 million, in fact more than £500 million now, in a network of organisations that form the foundation of the sport and physical activity infrastructure in this country. Whether that's directly through our partnership funding that some of you in the room receive, whether it's through standalone funds, like we have a crowdfunder platform, we have a small grants program, and we also invest indirectly through, again, some of the people in this room to reach smaller community organisations that we as Sport England haven't traditionally been brilliant at reaching. But more than anything, Uniting the Movement is a strategy for tackling inequality in sport and physical activity. And to do that, we need to work differently. We need to act less like a bank and more like a development agency. Because at headline level, the numbers might have recovered. And actually, there have never been a greater proportion of active people in this country. But that masks loads of deep-rooted and worsening inequalities. As an example, if you're more affluent and you live in an area with lower levels of deprivation, there's nearly 30% difference in your activity levels than if you live in a deprived area and you're less affluent. Right? If you're poor and you live in a deprived area, less than half of the people in those places are active. If you're well off in a well-off area, it's more than 3/4 of people who are active. And those sorts of numbers are replicated across lots of different demographic groups. So while the headline number looks good, there's lots of stuff hidden beneath it that we want and are working to try and address. So it's a strategy for transforming what we do, but also how we do it. Because as Liz has alluded to, the solution to these problems is a lot more complex than we used to think it was. Right? We can't buy easy solutions. Right? The solutions are complicated. The ways of working are complicated, and we have to embrace that. If there was a simple solution out there, we'd have done it. We'd have bought it, local government would have bought it, central government would have bought it, and we'd have done it. We wouldn't be together in the room wondering how we might get on and do it. So we have to embrace the fact that things are getting more complex, but if we work together, we can chart a path through that. So as our role in Sport England is leading a path through some of that complexity, and we take that role quite seriously. But in the past, it's felt a little bit like we've told people what to do. We think the complexity looks like this. We think you should do that. We're going to give you some money to go off and do that. What our strategy demands now is really, really deep collaboration with a clear purpose that we can all sign up to, because individually, even Sport England, right, we've got less money than local government, but we've still got a reasonable amount of money. But if you compare that to other public sector organisations trying to achieve similar goals, it is a drop in the ocean, right? We can't go out and just buy the things that we want. We can't buy the change that we want. So out go top-down, centrally funded, same across the nation programmes, and in comes something that is a lot more flexible. It's a lot more specific to local areas. It's a lot more deeply rooted in collaboration. And it actually relies an awful lot on advocacy, which is something that we'd all done, and something that Liz talked about, but we hadn't really done it systemically. So we now want to be part of a unified voice for change, an advocate for change, and we're going to make that an explicit part of all of our work. So what are some of the things that we want to advocate on? We set out in our strategy 5 areas that we were going to focus on, not because we thought they were important, but actually because you all told us that they were important in the consultation that we did. So we know that recovering and rebuilding from COVID is still an issue, but it presents an opportunity to reinvent our sector that's more relevant for people. We want to connect with health and well-being. Some of those statistics that Liz used ring really true, and so we should see ourselves as part of the same ecosystem, not 2 different things with 2 different government departments that we speak to. We want to talk about positive experiences for children and young people. We want to talk about how we use our funding and our knowledge and our expertise to help connect communities. And once we've connected those communities, how they can support each other to increase levels of activity. And we want to talk about building active environments around us and how we respond to issues like the climate crisis. So picking a couple of those, I'm going to start with children and young people. It's the most often cited challenge that we want to solve. It's probably the thing that feels like we've made less progress than we would have wanted to over the last decade. So how are we approaching it differently? Whereas in the past we might have invested in a program, funded somebody to do something, send out loads of kit to loads of schools and see what happens. We're trying to tackle this more systemically. So we have recently published a physical literacy consensus statement. For those of you that don't know, physical literacy is about the degree to which we've got a positive and meaningful relationship with movement and physical activity. One of the challenges that we faced here is not everyone had the same view of what the problem was. So if we can get everyone to unite around a single unified statement of the problem and a direction of where to go, we can work collectively and collaboratively far more effectively to deliver some change. At its heart is about fun, happy, positive experiences of sport and physical activity, because doing that breeds confidence. If you have confidence in sport and physical activity, you're more inclined to do it. If you do more of it, you build more physical literacy, better physical literacy, you get more confidence, you have more fun. It's a self-sustaining thing. I know this. I've got a 9-year-old and a 4-year-old. If they're not having fun, they're not going to do it. They have a great time, they learn something, they practice it, they get on with it, and they've learned something and developed, they love it, they come back. It's kind of not rocket science, but we've never built our collective mission and vision around it. So funded by us, using some National Lottery money, but with input from more than 50 organisations, some of whom are in the room, we published this, the consensus statement. I'd really encourage you to dig it out, to have a look and think what it means for your organisations, because it means that we can then build a shared understanding of where we all want to get to. Similarly, we do a lot of work in and around what we call kind of active environments. So how we create physical places and spaces where people can be more active, enabling communities to be more active in and around places that feel like home to them, but also stepping up on environmental sustainability. It's not always easy to create spaces that enable people to be active. There's lots of competing forces when it comes to planning and development. But good design, done right at the right stage of the process, can unlock massive positive benefits in places for people and build in physical activity in a way that sometimes is really overt, sometimes it's really subtle. A little nudge here and there to get people to be active where they might not. A cycle lane in the right place between two things that have just been built. Doesn't sound like rocket science, but quite often if those two developers aren't talking to each other, those connections aren't made and an opportunity is lost. A new housing estate that's built with a car parking space in front of every house, but nowhere to store a bike. Right? That just says to people, walk out your door, get in your car, drive to the shops. Don't walk, don't go on your bike. Okay? So to help support this, we've published some active design guidance earlier this year, working across different government departments. So we've worked with the Office for Health Improvement and Disparities. We've worked with Active Travel England to develop this, to offer support to a wide range of organisations. Anyone grappling with a problem like this, we've got support and guidance to help. We also know that wrapped up in this is a challenge around climate change. So we know it's having an adverse effect on people's sport and physical activity levels already. The heat wave last year, if you remember it, doesn't feel like heat waves exist anymore, it's pretty cold, but the heat wave last summer, 1 in 7 adults and a quarter of kids said that they couldn't get active because it was too hot, right? This isn't a thing in the future, this is something that's affecting us and our sector right now. And our estimates suggest that our sector generates, and this is just for grassroots sport, something in the region of 6 million tonnes of CO2 equivalent emissions every year. And the majority of that is travel to and from sport and physical activity. So not only are we feeling the consequences, we're part of the problem. Right? We're generating a massive contribution to this existential threat. So we've got to grapple with this. We can't do it ourselves as Sport England. We've got to do it collectively as a sector. Liz mentioned the swimming pool support fund earlier. One of the big changes in that, as in the past, we might have put £60 million into running some pools to keep them running. What we've actually done is put 2/3 of that money into improvement of those pools, infrastructure improvement, changes to lighting, changes to heating systems, changes to insulation, solar panels for roofs, to try and make it more environmentally sustainable, but also more financially sustainable for those organisations. I said I'd do some stuff on what's next as well, because we've got some big stuff coming up. Many of you will remember back in 2017, Sport England announced its local delivery pilots. Liz mentioned one of them is Southall, where we took a very different approach to how we work in partnership with local authorities to understand the nature of the challenge and the problems in their area that sport and physical activity might be able to tackle, and to work together with them and loads of partners on the ground well beyond sport and physical activity to try and address them. We learned loads about how to do it, that there isn't a one-size-fits-all model. What works in Southall doesn't work in Exeter. But we also learned that there's some common themes around leadership, around capacity building. And ultimately, it works. Right? It makes a real difference, far more so than any top-down programme that we might have run. So we're going to do more of it. So next month, we're going to announce what is one of our biggest investments over the course of our 10-year strategy in rolling out the principles behind local delivery pilots to many, many, many more areas. This is a very complex, I talked about complexity at the start, this is hard stuff for us to do, but we are really committed to it because we know that this is the way of working that's going to unlock real meaningful change in the future. So keep your eyes peeled for that. We are also reinventing how we provide open funding opportunities to the sector. Lots of people will be familiar with things that we've run, like the small grants program, where people can bid in for money for a particular thing. We're trying to change how we offer those pots of money to make them much easier, simpler to access. You don't have to try and decode which of 43 different funds you might be eligible for. We're going to do all that work for you. You're going to be able to come and tell us what you want to do, how you want to do it, and we'll help find the right answer. Same for those non-financial tools and resources that we offer to make it simple as standard. Some words from our strategy: simple as standard to work with Sport England, which hasn't always been the case. I'm going to finish with one challenge. Always got to finish a speech with a call to action, right? So, and it's actually quite similar to one of Liz's, and it's around impact. So one of the things that we're finding is, as we work in a different and more complex way, evidencing impact becomes harder. Right? We are doing less direct delivery than we ever have before, and evidencing impact when you don't directly deliver things is really hard. Right? And at the same time, we're getting more and more pressure for, tell us the impact of this thing. You've got some money. What did you spend it on? Did it work or not? And it's quite hard to reconcile those two things. We talk a bit about a bow tie of accountability, where we're there in the center, we're the knot in the middle of the bow tie, and lots of organisations have the same. And we feel both accountable into our sector, where there's lots of complexity in delivery, but also accountable into government. Like, we spend taxpayers' money. It's not unreasonable to want to know what you've delivered for that. And it quite often feels like there's a tension in there, and we kind of wish that one bit would disappear and we could just all focus on the other bit. The real challenge that we've got actually is holding both of those spaces simultaneously, where we make space for the complex, but we also look to simplify when that's needed, and we can translate from one to the other. Because while we have got loads of brilliant evidence, right, we can all talk about what gets put into our system really clearly, whether that's investment or people or skills or coaches or programs that have been run. And we can all talk about the stuff that comes out the other end, right? We've costed all the impacts, the positive impacts of sport and physical activity. We can tell you exactly who's been active, where and when and doing what. We aren't very good at making the link from one to the other. And that's where some of the impact and advocacy challenge hits us as a sector, because the questions we get from government, from the Treasury, is show us how you get from A to B. And that's the bit that we as a sector need to collectively work on, is understanding that there is a complex theory of change, and goes to, developing leadership in a local area, to that translating through to people being more active. But we've got to be able to evidence that journey and be really confident in those theories of change that they will get there, and put the impact measures around it. So if there's one challenge that we all need to grapple with more, is taking those brilliant bits of impact that we've already got, but being really clear where that golden thread is that runs through all of it. That's going to make our advocacy job easier. It's going to make forging new partnerships easier. It's going to make unlocking investment from government departments easier, and it's going to make it easier for us to continue to build our movement together. But I don't want to end on a downer. Right? There's lots of challenges that we need to face and lots of barriers to overcome. But I don't want to lose sight of the progress that we've made. In reflecting where we were in 2016 when I last did one of these to where we are now, despite a global pandemic, more people are active than have ever been active before. We have got a sector that is more united on the mission and the purpose and the vision that we're all seeking. There's going to be loads of talk today about things that we need to do differently, things that we want to change. All of that is completely true, but don't lose sight of the fact that we are coming at those challenges from a real position of strength. Thank you very much.